between your knees.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
I still remember watching Jurassic Park as a kid. I was glued to the screen when the rain started to fall and the glass of water began to ripple. Then came the roar, the snapped fence wires, and Rexy stepped out. Towering, thunderous, terrifying. That moment when she emerges between the cars didn't just make me a dinosaur fan. It made me a film fan. Along with a few other franchises, of course, like Back to the Future, Star Wars, and Indiana Jones. Even now, Jurassic Park 1 is my favorite film in the entire franchise. I cheer for Rexy more than the human characters, though I've always had a soft spot for Alan Grant, and recently discovered the holy grail that is Sam Neill's TikTok account, a complete gift to the internet. What makes the original Jurassic Park so timeless, it's not just the effects, though they were groundbreaking for the time, it's the way Spielberg wove awe and terror together. The T-Rex animatronic breaking through the SUV's glass roof? That wasn't scripted. It actually malfunctioned, and it scared the cast so badly they screamed for real when the big animatronic crashed through the roof of the van. Spielberg ended up keeping the take just because it looked so real, and it's because it was. Blending animatronics with early CGI, the team behind the film, Stan Winston, Phil Tippett, Dennis Moran, pulled off what seemed impossible for 1993. They made dinosaurs feel real, and Spielberg knew how to sell the illusion. The rippling water cup created by a vibrating guitar string hid under the car's dash became one of cinema's most iconic, tension-building scenes. Culturally, the film hit like a meteor. It wasn't just a hit, it was the hit. It rewrote the blockbuster rulebook and redefined what visual effects could do. Even the differences from Michael Crichton's novel, like making John Hammond more sympathetic or keeping Malcolm alive, felt purposeful. Spielberg wasn't just adapting a book, he was sculpting a myth based on a book. Then came The Lost World. Darker, meaner, and more chaotic. Spielberg returned, but you could feel the tonal shift. The first two-thirds built tension well, the trailer hanging off a cliff remains one of the franchise's most intense sequences. But by the time a T-Rex is stomping through San Diego, the film feels like it's wandered into monster movie territory. It still made a fortune, and some fans love its gonzo energy, but even Spielberg later admitted he lost steam during production. The book structure was almost completely abandoned, with the film inventing its own climax. It's a sequel that chased escalation over wonder, and it shows. Which brings us to Jurassic Park 3, the black sheep of the trilogy. But not to me. I'll take it over The Lost World any day. It's lean, fast, and self-aware. It doesn't pretend to be profound, it just wants to entertain you with the Spinosaurus, Raptors, and Pteranodons in a foggy aviary. And honestly, mission accomplished. Don't get me wrong, there are a few issues like Alan Grant hallucinating a raptor talking to him, and them continuously weakening the T-Rex starts here, but it was still fantastic otherwise. However, the production was famously messy. The script was rewritten mid-shoot, entire plotlines were scrapped, and the cast members weren't shy about voicing their confusion. But the creature work was solid. I mean, the Spinosaurus animatronic that they used was the biggest they'd ever built. It was strong, and it accidentally snapped some of the T-Rex's animatronic's neck during filming. The changing of the guard moment that I was talking about where they weaken the Rex, it still divides most fans to the day.
We were here.
The phone, that stupid jingle from the store, I heard it.
My phone?
Yeah, your satellite phone. Where is it?
I don't have it.
When did you use it last?
On the plane. I got a call on the plane and
What? What?
I loaned it to Nash. He must have had it when he...
By the end of Jurassic Park 3, the franchise had run out of steam. We didn't get any grand finale, just a rescue and a quick escape, but looking back, each of these films felt like a unique mark. The first redefined what movies could do, the second proved audiences were still interested in the franchise, even if it did stumble, and the third gave us closure with one last bite-sized adventure. Even now, decades later, those original 3 films hold a kind of magic the newer ones are still trying to chase. And it all began with that ripple in the cup, and a dinosaur stepping into cinematic legend. If the original Jurassic Park trilogy asked, should we have done this? Then the Jurassic World trilogy all but answered, yes, and let's go bigger. I saw every one of these films in theaters, and honestly I wasn't disappointed by a single one. Jurassic World especially felt like the closest we've come to recapturing the magic from the 1993 original. It's second only to the original in my rankings. Fallen Kingdom leaned into horror, which I loved, and while Dominion had some clear structural missteps, I still think it's a better film than it gets credit for, especially when compared just to The Lost World. But let's break each of them down. By the time Jurassic World opened in 2015, it had been 14 years since Jurassic Park 3. The franchise was dormant, stuck in development hell, dozens of abandoned scripts floated around, some featuring militarized raptors hinted in Jurassic World, others human-dino hybrids with weapons. Then director Colin Trevorrow, who was relatively unknown at the time, was tapped to helm the reboot. His pitch was simple but effective. What if the park had actually opened? That premise alone sold millions of tickets. This was the film that turned the idea of Jurassic Park into Jurassic Product. Corporate naming rights, custom-designed dinosaurs, guest-friendly gyrospheres. Jurassic World played like a satire of blockbuster filmmaking itself. Verizon Wireless presents the Indominus Rex. It wasn't just a joke, it was, but it was also kind of a warning of what this franchise would be. But Trevorrow also knew how to use that critique within the spectacle. The Indominus Rex, genetically engineered, overpowered, and unpredictable, became a literal metaphor for franchise escalation. It was designed to be marketable, scary, and over the top. Production-wise, the film marked a clear shift. While animatronics were used sparingly, CGI dominated. The results were occasionally uneven. Some dinos looked a bit rubbery in daylight, but the emotional beats still landed. And it didn't look bad by any means. Chris Pratt's Owen Grady and Bryce Dallas Howard's Claire Dearing were new kinds of leads. Not scientists or dreamers, but a soldier and a COO. And yet, amidst the chaos, the film still gave us a hero moment for Rexy. The original T-Rex from Jurassic Park 1, returning to save the day with a raptor named Blue and a mosasaur by her side. I cheered. Almost everyone did. Critically, the film received solid if cautious praise. Some found it derivative, others praised its meta-commentary, but culturally it was a phenomenon. Jurassic World became the highest-grossing film of 2015, until Star Wars The Force Awakens beat it out later that year. Another fantastic film and start to a trilogy. It made over $1.6 billion worldwide. Jurassic Park was back. And now, it was bigger than ever. Then came Fallen Kingdom, a weirder, moodier film that divided audiences hard. Directed by J.A. Bayona. Sorry if I butchered that. It leaned fully into gothic horror imagery. The first half is a volcano escape, the second a haunted mansion, with genetically weaponized dinosaurs stalking children in the shadows. and I kinda loved it. It's the first film in the franchise to really shift the genre more and really get more of that horror out of the thriller that has always been there. Bayona brought his horror chops from The Orphanage. There are shots in this film that feel pulled straight from Nosferatu, especially the Indoraptor creeping along the rooftop in the moonlight. The tone is eerie, suspenseful, and far more intimate than the wide-open jungle chaos we're used to. Yes, the plot has its issues. The auction scene is tonally bizarre, the villain motivations are cartoonish, and the idea of cloning a human child, named Maisie, felt like a very huge leap that the film only kinda half committed to. But what did work was the atmosphere, the horror, the shift from dinosaur thriller to straight-up horror. Not everyone was a fan, but it made Fallen Kingdom stand out. Behind the scenes, Bayona fought hard for practical effects when possible. The scene of Blue on the operating table was achieved with a full animatronic, the lava sequence used physical sets and only enhanced with digital fire, and the goal was to make it feel tangible again. Reception was unfortunately mixed, and rightfully so. Critics were harsher than they had been with World, but box office returns were still massive, $1.3 billion worldwide. It was proof that the franchise still had legs, even as it started walking in, similar to how Jurassic Park: The Lost World did. It even kind of mimicked the finale of now dinosaurs roaming the mainland. Dominion had everything it needed to be great. Legacy characters were returning. Dinosaurs roaming the mainland was an interesting way to start the film. The returning director from the first Jurassic World trying to bring it all home, and while it wasn't the disaster some claim it was, it's hard not to see it as just a huge missed opportunity. The biggest problem was the film's structure. The film decides to split its cast into two parallel stories that don't intersect until near the final act of the film. The Jurassic World cast of Claire and Owen are searching for Maisie and Blue's baby who were abducted by Biosyn. Meanwhile, Alan, Ellie, and Malcolm, the heroes of the original trilogy, are investigating genetically engineered locusts at the same Biosyn's headquarters. Both are decent ideas, and the storyline with the legacy characters almost kind of feels like that slow build from the originals, while the storyline with the newer characters of Owen and Claire feel more high-paced action like their trilogy usually did. But when you put them together side by side, it just feels like you're watching two separate short films stitched into one feature. The emotional beats don't always connect because the characters don't interact until the film's almost over. And then there's a T-Rex, Rexy, back again. But this time, she's weakened, sidelined, and forced to share the spotlight with the Giganotosaurus. A creature the film tries to sell as the biggest apex predator who ever lived, which isn't wrong, but the fact is that it didn't have the bite force or bite power that a T-Rex would have had. So when Rexy is able to finally get its jaws around the Giganotosaurus, the fight should have been over. But other than for dino nerd reasons, if we go back to writing, the Giganotosaurus wasn't as good either way because it didn't have the build-up or personality that ended up making Rexy so iconic. Rexy does get her moment again in the end, but it's a tag team alongside a Therizinosaurus, and it feels kind of like just a repeat of the Jurassic World finale, only kinda less earned. Still though, I did like Dominion more than The Lost World even, and I'd put it alongside Fallen Kingdom in my rankings, close to tied. The performances were solid, Sam Neill and Laura Dern slipping effortlessly back into their roles. Jeff Goldblum had a blast, and it's always fun to see him, and it finally gave us a look at a world where dinosaurs live alongside humans in every day, even if it didn't explore that premise as deeply as it should have. Behind the scenes, COVID delayed production and reshaped the film's scope. Trevorrow returned to direct, bringing his trilogy full circle, and practical effects were used more liberally than in the last two films. Over 100 animatronic elements were built for Dominion, including baby dinos and close-up puppets. It was a clear attempt to honor the legacy of the entire franchise, even if the storytelling and structure didn't match that ambition. What the Jurassic World trilogy proved is that the franchise still had global power. Financially, it's a juggernaut. Emotionally, it still hits, at least for those of us who grew up loving these creatures. And yes, they've become more blockbuster than brainy now, but they still carry echoes of the original spark. Jurassic World gave us the awe again. Fallen Kingdom gave us dread. Dominion tried to give us closure. Not all of it worked, but I'm glad they swung big. I saw them all in theaters, and for their flaws, I always walked out smiling. Now one that you might not know as well, Camp Cretaceous dropped on Netflix, and I'll admit, I didn't expect much. It looked like a fun side project. It was animated, clearly aimed at kids, and loosely tied to Jurassic World. But what started as a Saturday morning adventure series slowly evolved into something darker and deeper, and more emotionally complex. And by the time the sequel series Chaos Theory premiered years later, it was clear the animated Jurassic universe had grown up with its audience. Much like how Star Wars The Clone Wars did. This was no longer just a side story. It had become essential viewing for fans who wanted to see what happened in the shadows of the main films. Set during the events of the first Jurassic World movie, Camp Cretaceous gave us a parallel story, told through the eyes of 6 teenage campers who ended up stranded on Isla Nublar. At first, the show feels like a fairly standard kids' survival adventure, fun, colorful, with just enough danger to keep things tense. But what made it work, and what kept me watching, was how fast it matured. We get to see the Indominus Rex break out from a completely different angle. We explore forgotten parts of the island, including the original Jurassic Park Visitor Center, now overgrown and roamed by Blue the Raptor. And that moment when Blue attacks the group, only to later recognize and protect them, was both terrifying and kinda nostalgic. It reminded me why I fell in love with the franchise in the first place. But the turning point, the moment the show stepped out of the just for kids box, was the arrival of the Scorpius Rex. The thing wasn't just scary for a cartoon, I mean it was nightmare fuel. The malformed hybrid had venomous spines, erratic movement, and an almost zombie-like unpredictability. It was easily the most horrifying dinosaur the franchise had introduced, live action or otherwise. Over 5 seasons, the show leaned harder into character arcs, moral dilemmas, and actual consequences. These weren't just kids surviving a dinosaur attack, they were dealing with betrayal, trauma, and the fallout of corporate greed. Manticorp's experimentation with dino mind control added a little bit of a sci-fi layer and hinted at Dominion's themes. And by the final season, we'd see friendships fractured, loyalties tested, and more lore connected to the wider Jurassic World than expected. The animation may have kept things PG, but emotionally it matured along its audiences. And by the time the credits rolled on Season 5, it felt more than just a spin-off. It felt like canon. Then came Chaos Theory, and suddenly this wasn't a kids' show anymore, it was a full-blown conspiracy thriller, just animated. Set about 6 years after Camp Cretaceous and running parallel to the events of Jurassic World Dominion, Chaos Theory reunites the original group, now young adults, and immediately raises the stakes. Brooklyn is dead. From the jump, the show feels different. There's a maturity to the writing, a heaviness to the pacing, the tone is more serialized, gone are the tropical backdrops and bright color palettes. Instead, we're in a world of corporate espionage, secret labs, and dinosaur black markets. And what starts as an emotional mystery, what really happened to Brooklyn, quickly becomes something much bigger. Brooklyn is not dead, she's gone undercover. Now her hand completely eaten by an Allosaurus, and she's neck deep in a smuggling ring that ties directly to Dominion's Malta scene. There are references to Biosyn, to Dotson, to the Locust. Characters from films make cameos, and yet it never feels like fan service. It feels like connective tissue. Like we're finally seeing what the movies left out. What I loved most was the emotional realism. These aren't the same kids from Isla Nublar. They've changed, they're traumatized, friendships are strained. Some have drifted apart, and others, like Kenji and Brooklyn, are forced to confront the fallout of everything they've been through. Even Darius, once the wide-eyed dino nerd, now works for the Department of Prehistoric Wildlife. He's jaded and distant. These aren't just character updates, they're natural evolutions. Similar to how Clone Wars did with Anakin and Ahsoka, Chaos Theory adds depth to the characters that the films never had time for. It asks harder questions. Can you forgive someone who kept secrets to protect you? How do you move on from childhood trauma when the past literally comes roaring back? The show still delivers on dinosaur action, of course, the chase sequences, the Malta infiltration, the ethically blurry dino experiments. It's all here. But it's grounded in character, in grief, in survival, and it's easily one of the most engaging stories in the franchise right now. The best part is it's not even over yet. As of now, Chaos Theory is still ongoing, and I'm waiting patiently, but with that familiar buzz for the next season. Because if Camp Cretaceous gave us wonder and terror of childhood, Chaos Theory is showing us what happens when that wonder grows up and realizes the real monsters might not always have claws. There's always a moment, right before a new Jurassic movie drops, where I start wondering, is this the one that brings it all together? And judging by what we've seen of Jurassic World Rebirth, it just might be that movie. It's being marketed as a fresh start, no legacy characters, no complicated continuity loops, just a new team, a new island, and a new kind of threat. Director Gareth Edwards, who made Rogue One and The Creator, is behind the camera. David Koepp, the original Jurassic Park screenwriter, is back writing. And the cast has Scarlett Johansson, Mahershala Ali, Jonathan Bailey. No stunt casting, no nostalgia bait, they're just talented. But make no mistake, the nostalgia is still there, it's just more earned. This time the story drops us into a lost island once used by InGen. Because if you remember, the islands were called the 5 Deaths. That means there's 5 islands. But in the movies we've only ever seen 2. Isla Sorna and Isla Nublar. On this one they say the dinosaurs were all failed experiments and just were left to live and thrive on the island. It's not another park, it's not mainland crisis, it's a return to a remote, dangerous place where nature took back control, just like the original. The trailers paint a picture that feels like the perfect hybrid of Jurassic Park suspense and Jurassic World scale. Dense jungles, towering predators, a tight-knit team fighting to survive. And finally, we're getting something fans have wanted since the 1993 novel. The T-Rex river scene. That classic moment where the Rex stalks a raft through flooded jungle water is now being fully realized on screen. And from the trailer, it looks incredible. It's a scene 30 years in the making. We're also getting a return to classic dinosaurs. The T-Rex, Spinosaurus, Dilophosaurus, Mosasaur, raptors, and even a significantly updated Spino design that looks more crocodilian than ever. And I don't believe that this is going to infringe on canon, as they could just say that these Spinos were bred later after the scientific discovery of how they look, so that way it doesn't break canon with how the Spino looked in Jurassic Park 3. The dino roster is stacked, and from what's been shown, the practical effects are back in a meaningful way. The vibe is more grounded, more suspenseful, and more in line with what made the franchise feel real in the first place. And yet there's one thing that gives me pause. They've introduced a new creature, what fans are calling the D-Rex, but short for Distortus Rex. It's a 6-limbed, malformed T-Rex clone with other DNA, of course, and honestly, I don't know how I feel about it yet. Visually, it's grotesque. It doesn't even look like a dinosaur, it honestly looks closer to an xenomorph, and it's the product of failed genetic experiments, something that never should have existed. But still, I can't help but be worried. We've been down this road before with hybrids like the Indominus and the Indoraptor, and while the D-Rex is being framed less as a supervillain, more as a biological horror, the ideas of returning to mutated dinosaurs makes me nervous. Because Jurassic at its best is about awe, terror, and respect for nature and the history and paleontology and actual dinos. It's not a Godzilla monster movie. That said, I'll admit, the trailers haven't disappointed. The action looks tight, the visuals are stunning, and the tone feels more park than world, which is exactly what I was hoping for. It's suspense over spectacle, practical over plastic, and with the creative team they've assembled, there's real potential for this to be more than a reboot. It could be a genuine evolution of the franchise. So yeah, I'm excited. Cautiously, maybe, but excited. Because Jurassic World Rebirth feels like the franchise finally circling back to what it made great. There's dinosaurs, humans, and survival, and that underlying tension of could we versus should we? If it sticks the landing, it could be the best film since the original. And if it doesn't, well, I'll still be there in cinema. Because at the end of the day, I'm still that kid watching a T-Rex step through the fence, wide-eyed, heart racing, hoping this time they get it right. There's a rhythm to these films, a pulse. Footsteps in the mud, ripples in a glass, the distant sound of something ancient waking up. We've followed that rhythm for over 30 years, from the first breathless encounter with a Brachiosaurus, to the quiet roar of a raptor opening a door, to a mutant monster prowling through the ruins of our ambition. We've seen awe and terror trade places, sometimes scene by scene, sometimes sequel by sequel. And through it all, we've kept coming back, because Jurassic Park was never only about the dinosaurs. It was about the fragility of control, about humanity's arrogance and nature's patience, about how wonder can easily tip into chaos, about how no matter how many fences you build, life finds a way.